If you've been wanting to put something out into the world, whether it's an art project or a business venture, but you've been avoiding it, this video is for you. So what we're really talking about is a term that Seth Godin has termed called shipping it. That would be if you're working on a book, actually sending it to an agent or publishing it. It means if you have a YouTube channel like this, to actually press publish. If you have a product, to test it in the market somehow to try to actually get a customer. And it is scary. So let's dive in with all the different ways we can conceptualize shipping it so that we actually bridge that gap and click that button or make the call, whatever we need to do. I think the number one reason we don't ship is because what is in our head does not match what we have created. Let's say that you are writing something and you're a couple pages in and you just think, you know what, I don't know if that's the way I want to start this book. Let me start over. There might be another way that I could weave in these topics. Or filming these videos. Often I will film a video and not post it because what I imagined the video to be, the way I wanted to articulate certain points, the feeling that I wanted to convey, it's just not hitting it. It's missing the mark. So I won't post it. Now, we'll get into later how this is tied to perfectionism, but there's another thing that's at play here. It is the limitation of a medium to be able to convey what's in your head. Whether that's from budget constraints or not being able to find the color blue that you had in your mind, how people look at the work or take it in with their unique lens. But a lot of that comes from the constraints of language itself. Words are a symbol for something more complex, what they actually symbolize or mean. Let's take water as an example. Now, when I said water, I held up a water bottle. But if you were listening to the podcast version of this, you might have pictured the ocean. Everyone has their own idea of what a word means because a word does not capture the meaning in its entirety. That's why we need more words to try to encapsulate a image, a feeling, a realization, whatever we're trying to articulate. And we will never be able to do it perfectly because words are symbols and not the real thing. As Alan Watts says, the menu is not the meal. If you were writing a memoir and you were writing about being in the water, you might say the biting cold, but that wouldn't actually fully articulate the feeling of what it was like in the water and all of the other things you experienced, like how it felt when that seaweed grazed against your ankle and you were worried that it was some sort of an animal in the water. It's like you can't, it's so nuanced, it's so complex. There's so much from our senses to our emotions to everything that it means to have an experience that we won't be able to give that in its entirety. Even if, they say an image is worth 1,000 words, and if in actually being in an experience would be probably worth 1,000,000. So we do our best. We do our best. We try to get as close as we possibly can. And David Duchovny, in an interview with Adam Grant that I will link below if you're interested, talks about this. He says, because I have this fundamental intuitive sense of failure between the expression and the execution, I'm not a perfectionist, and I'm quite happy with the stabs that I make in the dark. Something that I like, he seems to be inspired by it, that we will always fail in our art. We will never be able to create exactly what that vision is, but we just want to get as close as we possibly can. And then that is the art. A failure of being able to create the exact thing we wanted to is part of it. And I think that can strangely, counterintuitively take some pressure off. And it's sort of like mastering any craft. You're never going to completely get there, but you just want to get closer and closer and closer. And there's a certain beauty and zen in that. And this would apply to any art form, I believe, not just writing. Another thing that happens is that you might be comparing yourself to people that have been doing this thing for a very long time, or have teams with them, or you're comparing your first draft to their final version, which might be the 10th iteration of the piece of work that they released. So we're constantly judging ourselves unfairly, could be another component to consider. To loop this back to the original point, often we don't even refine our work. we see an early draft and get discouraged that it's not matching up with what we envisioned or not matching up with what we see others are putting out there. So we don't put in the additional revisions it needs for it to get to the quality that it needs to be at to ship. We're going to get to later why we don't want to just revise and never get it out into the world. But this is to help ourselves be less critical of those early first drafts that we're seeing that will never measure up to not only what we have in our head, but also what we're seeing out in the world. Another factor is what is called the dip. Also something by Seth Godin. I did not realize I'd be quoting him twice in this video. The way he defines the dip is that drop that happens after the initial excitement in the beginning and before you're often seeing the fruits of your labor pay off. So if you had a goal of launching a business, you might be so excited by the idea and how you can imagine it affecting the marketplace, the people it might impact, seeing it. Like you have all these different exciting images in your mind. You maybe light up when you're talking to other people about it. It's all potential, and potential is addictively beautiful. But then we get into it and maybe you're not attracting initial investors. Maybe the prototype has issues. You have a squabble with your co-founder. There's all these things. And then all of a sudden your initial excitement starts to drop. Now, there's a lot of, in the book, The Dip, he goes into whether or not you should persist with this goal, whether it's a sign that it's not right, or if it's a sign that you need to push through. And that could be a whole video unto itself, books unto itself. But realizing that it happens no matter the scenario, whether it is something that you should stick with or not, and it's not always a sign that you should quit or that it's not meant to be, it's an inherent curve in the process, is helpful. And it reminds me of a curve that I learned about in behavioral economics, which is a U-shaped curve of motivation where people have a lot of motivation when they go to try to change a habit in the beginning. Like think about New Year's, and then motivation drops when we're confronted with a certain challenge. Maybe we have the goal of working out and it's a really cold day. We don't feel like leaving our house to go to the gym. So motivation drops. And then it shoots back up again when maybe we're confronted with whatever made us want to be more strong or mobile in the first place. Going to just give a brief bullet point to this one, that it is worth asking yourself if you are sabotaging yourself. Are you holding back because you're afraid of it not measuring up? And then as a result of holding back, it doesn't measure up. Oof. I've done that. I think often on this channel, I will think, oh, I don't really need to script that much. I can just sit down. I already have a bunch of ideas on that topic. It's fine. And then I will get frustrated with those videos, the ones I referenced in the beginning that I don't post, and I don't post them. And then I'm not consistent. And then I get mad at myself for not being consistent. And versus no, sit your butt in the chair. It might not be perfect, but if you spend 2 hours scripting this, it will be better. You'll be more prepared. You will have given it an honest go. Could it have been better if you had given it 5 hours? Sure. Did I have 5 hours? No. So that's another thing to think about, is how much time do you realistically have to give to this where it's good enough, and then you press the button. And we have the biggest one for last, being seen. Oof. Did you feel anything there? Being seen. I think it's what we all want in some ways. We want to be understood. We want to be loved. We want to feel connected. Now, I think some of us don't feel seen or understood in our personal relationships, and maybe we're trying to fill a void through our work. I think there's a lot of people that try to be loved through their work. Even apart from that, let's say that you do have healthy relationships and you're not trying to get those needs met through your work. There is a desire we all have to feel approved of. We put a lot of ourselves into our art, and if someone rejects that, it can feel like a personal rejection, no matter how much work you've tried to do to separate yourself from that. One thing to remember is this is kind of like the other one, where like some level of failure or some level of that happening is inevitable and then we can make peace with it, is think of your favorite piece of art, whether it's a song, whether it's a movie, whether it's a painting. And if you were to look online, you could find people right now tearing that thing apart in some sort of scathing review or Reddit post or article. There's someone that hates it. They don't necessarily hate that person, but they do not like the work. So knowing that that's going to happen, now granted, a lot of us, the stuff we put out, not enough people will see it to even hate it, which can be a fear many people have also, putting something out and crickets. But we also have to remember that that will likely happen in the beginning when you're starting something. It's delusional to think that we will do something and have a large response at first because of how incredibly rare that is. So the good news is that you're usually creating in silence until later, so you have time to experiment and grow before there's eyes and ears on it. So to give a personal example to this, I have not been consistent in posting on this channel or my podcast. If you've been a subscriber, that's no secret to you. Now, that's for a lot of reasons. I won't go into all of those here. But one of them is that sometimes I will think, oh, I want to do really high value production, pour a ton into it, and, make sure that they're really high quality videos. But some of that is a way of hiding behind this perfectionism, hiding behind it's not good enough, let me wait till it is. And it's a way to not put out work. And what's funny is that people in my audience, a couple people that I've talked to, have actually said that they prefer the more relatable, real, off-the-cuff conversations and not my more polished work. That when I'm trying to do more polished work, it comes across as trying to say the right thing, or maybe it's a little bit more distant. So that's another thing, is often we have, there's a counter effect when we try to perfect something. But despite that, there's still the urge. I'll see a video that's really highly produced by someone and I'll think, oh, I want to be doing that. And even if that's true, maybe that's what I do down the line once I've proven to myself that I can ship consistently, that I can show up for people in an audience. Once I've proven to myself that I can consistently sit my butt in the chair and create on a schedule, then, maybe when I have some income coming in with the business, then I could hire a team that could help me produce at that caliber. But it's starting where we're at with what we have available to us and shipping. Keep trying to shift away from the light and it is moving fast. Let me close some blinds real quick. Maybe we earn the right to be precious about our work. Anthony Doerr, author of All the Light We Cannot See, he spent 10 years working on that Pulitzer Prize winning book, but he also was consistently releasing other work, and for a long time before that. So if someone heard he spent 10 years working on this Pulitzer Prize winning book, they might think, oh, let me spend 10 years working on my book. When they're not getting any feedback from the outside, they're also not getting in the reps of actually starting and finishing something and improving as they go. It turns into just being locked away in their room by themselves without any feedback, toiling, and the whole idea of 10,000 hours and all of that, regardless of what people think of that very mainstream idea. A lot of those hours require deliberate practice and feedback from the outside. If you were just in your room playing the violin forever and did not have any sort of feedback from a mentor or a coach, it would be harder to improve. There's probably exceptions to that, but I would think as a whole, a lot of people benefit from some sort of feedback. And so maybe that is what shipping is for you. I'm in a writer's group, and often for a lot of us, we had never really shared our work with someone before in that way until we had each other. And so shipping doesn't necessarily mean putting it out into the world. Maybe it means sending it to someone trusted to get feedback. You're still getting it in front of eyeballs, which is very different than being in your room working on it over and over and over again, which can turn into sort of spinning your wheels because you think you're improving it, but really maybe you're scared to show it to someone else. And it also makes sense from a strategic standpoint. A really common advice in business is to not spend years perfecting a product and then try and release it because you have no idea what people actually think of it or if they even want it. That you need to be market testing it along the way and as soon as possible. because a lot of people will waste months and years of their life working on something that maybe isn't viable in the marketplace. With the idea of being seen, let's now finish out with this idea of perfectionism. Let's look at a quote from Brené Brown. Understanding the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism is critical to laying down the shield and picking up your life. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it often is the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. It reminds me of when I was in therapy, I said to my therapist, I said it casually, I was like, perfectionism ruins things. And she laughed really hard and she's like, be a good book title, because it is true. It's like perfectionism ruins things. And it's the irony in that is that we're trying for it to be perfect, but it ends up being the opposite of that and further from the truth when we're aiming for it, because it is impossible. Another battle that we'll lose. And so that's a type of failure that I don't necessarily want. I don't want to try to be perfect and fail. I want to not try to be perfect. I want to try to make imperfect work that I have in my head, and I will fail to make it exactly what I want it to be. I will fail to be successful every time, but in that I succeed at putting my art and my heart into the world, to living authentically. And so it's a type of failure that's baked into a life well lived, not a failure to meet impossible expectations that leads to you beating yourself up over and over again for years, that does lead to that depression and anxiety and addiction that she references. And sharing is the antidote to shame, because when you stand as yourself, as a real, full human, that is how we can connect with other people. Let's look at a quote from Brené Brown's most recent book, Atlas of the Heart. It's in a bullet-pointed list, and she says, "We're drawn to authentic, imperfect people, but we're scared to let people see who we really are. Vulnerability is courage in you, but inadequacy in me. I'm drawn to your vulnerability, but repelled by my own." And this is interesting because the people and the works of art that we truly love aren't perfect, yet we feel as though what we present needs to be. It's this double standard. So the last 2 points here, you might have either heard about this ceramics class or a photography class, depending on where you read about this psychological phenomenon. But this teacher basically told their students, they split them into 2 groups. And one group, they said, I want you to take the best photograph you can. You're only going to turn in 1, so make it as good as you possibly can. They told the other group, just take as many pictures as you can. And the group that had more quantity, that focused on the number of just taking a bunch of pictures, they ended up with stronger images than the group that tried to get it all right and try and get it perfect and just have one shot. So often it is a numbers game. We improve with our business and our art through the reps, and we need those messy reps, sometimes publicly in front of people, sometimes by ourselves, but we need to get them in and we need to not be afraid of them being messy. So I'm making a commitment to you all. This year, I'm going to release 50 podcast episodes. I know they're not all going to be good. Who knows? Maybe this one won't be good, but I hope it's okay. That urge is always going to be there, but then maybe after a year, I can reevaluate and do different types of content down the line. But this year will be about the reps. And you can comment down below, what is something that you want to ship on this year? Oh, by the way, if you're watching on the YouTube, I have a second channel now that is more dedicated to things. This channel is on the psychology and philosophy and more internal matters. And then there's just been so much going on in the world that I want to talk about, economics and policy and technology and the environment and a lot of other stuff. So that will be on the other channel. So while there will be a weekly podcast episode, because these episodes are released on YouTube and the podcast, probably about half of those, about 25-ish, will be released here. And then the other half, when it's on other topics, those will be on the other channel. I will link that down below if you want to find that. It's called Contemplations on the Internet. I hope to see you there as well. And here's a closing thought from a dinner with my friend last night that was part of the inspiration for this video. And we were talking about how sometimes you need to just show up and do the thing. You don't need more prep time or planning time or to get better first or read up on it first or do the laundry first or get advice from a friend or think through all the potential obstacles first, although of course that can help when initially planning. But at a certain point, you need to do the thing and then stick with the thing and ship the thing. And we talked about this being the year of just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Still do your best. Like we said, don't pull your punches. Give it your best shot, but actually take the shot. And show up as you instead of who you imagined you could potentially be in your head. Have the courage to show up as you. See you whenever I post next on this channel, but definitely next week on the podcast. If you are looking for that, that is the Pam Carey Show on Apple and Spotify, also linked below. I love you. Thank you for being here. Talk to you next time.